There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a room full of powerful people when something happens that none of them expected. Not the polite silence of a formal dinner, or the attentive silence of a boardroom presentation. Something rawer than that. The silence of a crowd that has just watched the ground shift beneath someone's feet and hasn't yet decided how to feel about it. The room that evening was the kind of room that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year. Glass and steel and lighting, engineered to make everything inside it look like it belonged in a magazine. The occasion was the private unveiling of Fulcrum Automotive's newest hypercar, a silver machine crouched on a low platform, at the center of the floor like a sleeping animal, all curves and intention, worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 before options. Vivian Marsh had planned this evening down to the last detail. She was good at that. At 46, the CEO of Fulcrum Automotive was known for exactly three things in the industry: her precision, her appetite for public spectacle, and her absolute intolerance for being underestimated. She had built Fulcrum from a struggling mid-tier manufacturer into one of the most talked-about names in performance vehicles, and she had done it, as she was fond of reminding people, without inherited money, without a famous mentor, and without ever once apologizing for how she did things. The crowd that evening was 200 of the most influential people in automotive, finance, and technology, investors, journalists, a few celebrities who collected cars the way other people collect opinions. Everyone dressed for the occasion. Everyone aware, in the way that guests at these events always are, that they were here to witness something, though none of them knew yet that the something would not be the car. Nathan Coles arrived at 7:15, which was 15 minutes late, which was already, in Vivian's estimation, the wrong way to begin. He was 41 years old, wearing a jacket that fit well but wasn't new, dark trousers, no tie. He had the kind of face that took a moment to read, and not handsome exactly, not plain, just quietly composed. The face of a man who had learned a long time ago that the room's opinion of him was not the most important variable in any given situation. He carried nothing, just himself and the particular, unhurried quality of a person who has somewhere real to be and knows it. Vivienne noticed him the moment he came through the door, because she noticed everyone who came through the door. It was a habit of 30 years in a business where knowing the room was survival. She didn't recognize him. This was unusual enough to register. Her assistant materialized at her elbow within seconds. "That's Nathan Coles," the young woman said quietly. "He was on the original design. Team for the Fulcrum. 7. Left about 8 years ago. I know who Nathan Coles is," Vivian said, which was not entirely true but was the kind of thing she said when she needed a moment to think. She did know the name. Everyone in the room who'd been around long enough knew the name, or should have. Nathan Coles had been, a decade ago, one of the most gifted engine architects in the industry. A prodigy. The kind of word the trade press used reluctantly and then couldn't stop using. He'd left Fulcrum before the company became what it was now. Before Vivian took over, under circumstances that the official record described as a mutual parting, and that anyone who'd been there at the time described rather differently in quieter conversations. She had not expected him here tonight. She had not invited him. Someone else had, apparently. One of the investors, perhaps. Or someone on the legacy team who still had opinions about the past. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he was in her room at her event, standing in front of her car with an expression of quiet attention that, for reasons she couldn't immediately articulate, unsettled her. She crossed the floor toward him. "Mr. Coles," she said, extending a hand with the practiced warmth of someone who had shaken 10,000 hands in 10,000 rooms. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us this evening." "I wasn't sure I would be," Nathan said. He shook her hand. His grip was straightforward, not a performance. "Congratulations on the unveiling. She looks beautiful." He was looking at the car when he said it. Not at Vivian. At the car, with the particular expression of someone looking at something they recognize, on a level that goes deeper than aesthetics. Vivian felt the first small stirring of something she hadn't felt in a while. "Caution. You've seen the specs?" she asked. "Some of them," Nathan said. "Not all." "What do you think?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving over the cars, lines the way a reader's eyes move over a page they know well. I think whoever finished the engine work did something interesting with the torque. Distribution in the upper range. There's a choice there that most people wouldn't have made. I'd want to hear it run to know if it was the right choice. Vivian studied him. Around them, the party continued, glasses clinking, voices rising and falling. The low music the sound designer had spent 3 weeks calibrating. Nobody was paying attention to this particular conversation yet. That was about to change? You want to hear it run? She repeated. I'm curious, he said simply. And Vivian Marsh, who had not built her career by backing away from anything, made a decision in that moment that she would later, in the privacy of her own honest reflection, recognize as the decision of someone who had let her certainty get ahead of her information. Then let's make it interesting, she said. I'll bet you $2 million you can't start that car. The nearest conversations quieted. The silence spread outward the way silence does in a room full of people who sense that something real is happening. Nathan looked at her. Not with surprise, not with offense, with something closer to recognition. The look of a man who has seen this particular kind of moment before and knows exactly what it is. I don't have $2 million, he said. No, Vivian said, and her voice had taken on the particular quality it got in rooms like this. The carrying quality, the one that made sure people heard. I don't imagine you do. So let's say this instead. You start the car, I'll donate $2 million to whatever you name. You can't, you admit publicly, that this is the finest piece of engineering currently in production. Fair? Nathan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the car again. Then he said mildly, You want me to try to start it? If you think you can. He nodded once slowly, the way a person nods when they've made a decision they were already going to make. All right. What happened next took 4 minutes. And those 4 minutes were the kind that people in that room would describe for years. Afterward, each time the story got a little larger, a little more cinematic, though the truth of it was quiet enough. Nathan walked to the car. Vivian's security team shifted slightly, but she waved them still. She had made the bet publicly. She would see it through publicly. 200 people moved incrementally closer, the way crowds move when something real is about to happen. Nathan crouched beside the driver's side door and looked, for a long moment, at the paneling near the handle. Then he stood, opened the door, and sat inside. He didn't touch the ignition. He reached instead beneath the dash, with the unhurried certainty of someone reaching for something they know is exactly where they expect it to be, and made a small adjustment that nobody in the room could see clearly enough to describe afterward. Then he sat back, put his hand on the starter, and the car came alive. Not with a roar. The engine note of the Fulcrum 8, at idle, was something between a purr and a chord, layered and deep and unmistakably intentional. The sound of something built by someone who understood that power. Didn't need to announce itself to be real. The car idled with perfect smoothness, the kind of smoothness that takes years to engineer, and the sound filled the room. And the room went completely still. Nathan turned the engine off, got out of the car, closed the door carefully, the way you close a door when you respect what's on the other side of it. He looked at Vivian across the roof of the car. Her face was doing something complicated. The crowd was doing something complicated. Everyone was waiting for someone else to say something first. The torque distribution was the right choice, Nathan said. Whoever finished that work understood what the engine was trying to do. He said it without heat, without performance, just accurately, and then into the stunned and total silence of 200 people who were all doing rapid, private calculations about what they had just witnessed. Vivian Marsh asked the question she should have asked before she made the bet. How did you know where the access panel was? Nathan looked at her steadily. Because I put it there, he said, 8 years ago. Before I left. The Fulcrum 8 runs on a variant of an engine I designed in 2016. Whoever finished the development work did it well. Better than I expected, honestly. But the architecture is mine. The silence lasted a long time after that. Long enough to become something other than silence. Long enough to become a reckoning. Vivian Marsh paid the $2 million. She didn't hesitate. And she didn't make a show of it. Wrote the check that same evening. To a foundation that provided engineering. Scholarships to children from low-income families, which was, as it turned out, The cause Nathan had been, quietly funding for years with the modest income from his current work as a high school automotive teacher in a district 40 miles outside the city. That was something else the room hadn't known. That Nathan Coles, who had once been the most gifted engine architect of his generation, had spent the past 8 years teaching 16-year-olds in a shop class with equipment held together by determination and duct tape, because after he left Fulcrum, asked to leave, the quiet conversations had always suggested, over a disagreement about credit and attribution, that the official record never named directly. He had found that he liked teaching, more than he'd expected to, and that he was good at it in the way he was good at engines, which was to say, fundamentally, from the inside out. He had 3 kids, raised them alone since his wife passed 5 years earlier, drove a truck that was 11 years old and reliable, lived in a house that wasn't large but was, by all accounts of anyone who'd visited, very full of noise and homework, and engine parts on the kitchen table and the particular warmth of a home run by a father, who had decided, after loss, to be fully present for everything that remained. Vivienne found all of this out in the weeks after the unveiling, partly through research and partly through a conversation she initiated herself, which was not something she did easily or often, but which this particular situation seemed to require. She drove out to the high school on a Tuesday, unannounced in a car that was not the Fulcrum 8. She sat in the back of Nathan's shop class for 20 minutes before he noticed her, or at least before he acknowledged noticing her, which might not have been the same thing. She watched him explain torque to a group of 15-year-olds, with the same patient clarity he'd used in that showroom, and she watched the 15-year-olds lean forward in their seats, which told her everything she needed to know about whether he was good at this. After class, when the students had filed out, Nathan wiped his hands on a shop rag and looked at her without surprise. "You should have better equipment," Vivienne said, looking around the shop. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "We should. I'd like to fix that." Nathan studied her for a moment. "Because of the bet." "Because it's the right thing to do," Vivienne said. "And because I've been thinking about attribution." She paused. The Fulcrum 8's engine. The documentation should reflect who designed the original architecture. It should have reflected it 8 years ago. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Vivienne, who was not a woman who waited easily, waited. "All right," he said finally. The same word, the same tone, as in the showroom. The acceptance of someone who doesn't need the win to feel like a winner, but knows when to receive what's right. The shop got new equipment that spring. Floor to ceiling, everything Nathan had ever put on a wish list he'd never expected to show anyone. The documentation for the Fulcrum 8 was revised, quietly and without fanfare, to reflect the original design credits accurately. Nathan's students won a regional engineering competition the following year. 3 of them went on to engineering programs. One of them, a girl named Petra who'd been failing math when she walked into Nathan's class and who could now rebuild a transmission from memory, was offered a junior internship at Fulcrum the summer after her junior year. Nathan Coles remained a high school teacher. He had been offered other things with larger salaries and more impressive titles, and he considered them with the same careful attention he gave to everything, and declined. There is a particular kind of intelligence, the quiet kind, the kind that knows what it's for and doesn't need the room's permission to be it. That is rarer than any other kind. Nathan Coles had it. He had known it for years. His students were beginning to know it too. The car at the center of that room on that evening was worth $400,000. The engine inside it was worth more than that, though not in any way that a price tag could measure. And the man who built it was, on a Tuesday afternoon in a school shop that smelled of oil and ambition, teaching a 15-year-old that the thing about engines, the thing about most things, really, was that you had to understand them from the inside before you could do anything useful with them from the outside. The 15-year-old was leaning forward in his seat. Nathan kept talking, quietly and without hurry, the way a man talks, when he knows exactly what he's doing and exactly why it matters.